Continuing from where we just left off. So Kunashni, in the last segment, you told us a lot about, your personal journey and your personal learnings from sport. And now I'd like to talk to you more about, at a professional level, we've seen sports resuming. We've seen a lot of things change in the sport environment in the last couple of years. And more recently, with sports resuming, players have now faced another unique challenge, which is the BioBubble. We saw it with the IPL, we've seen it with cricket resuming and all the other sports. So what challenge do you think that this BioBubble poses to their mental health and well-being?
So when you talk about the BioBubble, the first thing that comes to mind is the physical restriction. And going beyond that, it's not just a physical restriction that you're inside that bubble, it's also a kind of mental restriction. It's because all your activities are happening there. So you're not allowed to explore, move out. So it really limits the kinds of experiences that you can have. So, if you just want to go out, take a stroll, you're not even allowed to leave the premises or leave that campus. So I think that really takes a toll on the mental health of the athletes. The second thing is because of this bio bubble, there are no fans in the stadium, right? So most matches are happening behind closed doors in empty stadiums. So I think due to this, and this is again, it's very subjective on the part of the athlete how they respond to it. But sometimes what can happen is in the lack of that crowd presence, your performance may waver. You might not be able to give in that best because that the cheering, the whole atmosphere, that's missing. So it's a strange feeling. So I think this is something that athletes might have to be aware of when they have to play behind closed door matches. And again, the bio bubble, the entire concept of it being a very closed, confined environment, you have to find ways to engage your mind in content that doesn't drive you crazy and keep focusing on the restrictions that are there. So I think these are the challenges that they would be facing.
I think we need some of these birds in the stadium to add to the feeling that, you're not alone. There are people cheering for you. As we have. But no, I think you mentioned a very valid point, especially, I did notice in the IPL that, a lot of times the younger players specifically are very into, being cheered on by the crowd. It kind of gives you like that little rush. And, all of a sudden you're playing, everything is just empty. As a viewer, it's obviously strange seeing it empty. And I know they've added all the, clapping sound and cheering sound, but I don't think it's the same, as you mentioned. It does create a very strange feeling. And I don't know, I know right now, if you see the Australia-India Test series, they have crowds, but again, that might even create anxiety for some people that, what if someone has the COVID? What if I'm getting exposed to someone in the crowd who could potentially, be a carrier?
Definitely. There's just so many factors involved, especially in these times where there's so much uncertainty, like we don't know what to expect. So again, it's up to that athlete, how they respond. And also the whole constant, temperature checking and all the other rules and restrictions, being very careful, the constant sanitizing. So you have to really make sure that you're following all those rules. And again, it can be a little limiting to your game, because when you're constantly worried about physical contact or any other kind of thing going on, it takes the focus away from delivering the next ball or hitting the next six that you want to focus your mind on. So there are a lot of things you have to mentally take care of.
I'm sure, a lot of people, obviously for us, when we've sat at home for so many months, we've enjoyed seeing sport coming back. But I'm glad, we spoke about this aspect, because people don't really realize what the athlete is going through just to put up that performance, which for us is entertainment, but for them, it can be quite stressful.
Another thing is that, sorry to interrupt, but I think there's one more point that I forgot to mention, is that because that in the bio bubble, they're also away from their families, away from their friends. So I know currently the ISL the football tournament is going on in Goa, and everybody who's living in the bio bubble. So it's just the hotel. So you go from the hotel to the stadium, back to the hotel. So it's just these two places that, you're shuttling back and forth. And some people, they're not going to see their families for the next 8 months till the season is over. So it's just, that hotel room. Yeah. And then back to the field. So being away from family in times like this during COVID, and with the pressure of high intensity sport where the whole country is watching your next game, I think that lack of social support is also very limiting. And I think that's why in these situations, I think teams should invest more in the mental health of their players.
And for that, we need more people like you, Kunashni, for teams to invest in. So another thing,
Yes.
as you mentioned, teams investing in their players, very often we see that, team management and coaches tend to focus on high performance management and how to build high performance into a team culture. So where do you think we can further emphasize on, mental health and well-being fitting into that entire ecosystem of a team culture? Because see, you also rightly mentioned from your experience, sorry, that you've seen that that support is missing. I'm sure national teams, the focus is so much on performance winning. Somewhere we forget to have that mental health piece to that puzzle. So how can we make sure, we fit that in, and where do you see it fitting in?
I think it should I think it should be a very centric part of the entire structure, like you said, to the high performance training. So training should not just be the physical training, the technical training that the team so much emphasize on, but the whole concept of mental training. First of all, it should happen as regularly as physical training. It shouldn't be just one night before the tournament, before the match, like, okay, the boys are going for the match tomorrow, can you come and give them a pep talk? Well, that's not how it works. That's not how mental health training works. It's not how you train your mind to be more resilient with one session the night before your game. So this is something that needs to be ingrained into the management, that 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 mental health resources uh, are not a fix, are not a quick fix solution to
Yeah,
something, but it's a kind of program, a kind of training, right? Like, you can't ask an athlete to start their training. You can't ask Michael Phelps to start swimming his laps a day before his tournament.
right,
He needs those months of training. So similarly, your mind to develop that, enhance that concentration, that focus, everything, it requires months of training and months of practice. So this is something that I think management needs to focus on. And the second thing is that it shouldn't be just at the team level, where you call them in, have a team bonding session. So I think there's a misconception where a sports psychologist is someone like a
like a
this sounds
buddy,
funny, but someone like maybe an MC who comes in and gathers the
Yeah,
crowd
you
and
do
like,
like
oh,
all these fun activities, and like, yeah, like it's not about icebreakers, it's so much more than
exactly.
that. Yeah,
I think that's what the misconception is, that okay, there's someone will come, they'll make them play some games, the players will enjoy for some time, and then it'll go back. So it should shift away more from this, team bonding aspect activities. And yes, you have that. That is also a very essential component to enhancing the communication and all the other things going on in the team. But you also need those individual sessions, because psychology is a study of an individual. Every
right,
person on that team does not have the same problem. Everybody
right,
has a different story, different background, might be going through something else. Someone might have some family problems going back home. Somebody comes maybe from a small town in Orissa where there's some other major issues going on there. Somebody is from a completely different background. So it's all about understanding that individual story, and that's not going to happen in an icebreaker session. You need to have an in-depth one-on-one counseling session with athletes who need that kind of intervention. So that's again something the management needs to understand, that this is how counseling works. It's not I'll come and give you a pep talk. It's like going down to not just a surface level, but going down deeper to what's going on. And I think the problem is that they just want a quick fix. Okay, my player's not performing, can you just talk to him?
yeah,
It's not like a magic pill that, okay, I'll say some magic words and it'll help. And first of all, again, the whole misconception about psychologists, it's not, we don't fix people, right?
exactly,
We facilitate their ability to fix themselves and
right.
recovery and get back on the path. So this is again something that
I
needs to
think,
be understood.
yeah, and I think as you rightly said, this whole element that, you're going to come, you're going to fix it. It's not a thing that's broken, it's a human being.
I'm not a carpenter or
It's
not a plumber.
exactly, it's their mind, you need to heal them, you need to help them find ways to heal themselves and kind of sustain that healing. And as you said, it doesn't happen overnight. It's not that, chalo, tomorrow we have a game, so let's get in someone today to, and to give them like a motivational speech. Like again, very rightly, sports psychologists are not necessarily motivational speakers. This is not the stuff you see on YouTube, which, or that Shah Rukh Khan speech from Chak De India, like you have 70 minutes, and it's so
Yes, yes.
much more than that, you don't have that one-off chat
True,
and
true, true.
that's it. You're done.
Another thing, they feel that the coach is there, so why do we need a psychologist? The coach can do the job. So, like you said, Shah Rukh Khan giving that pep talk speech. But the coach doesn't always know what the right thing is to say at the right time. And
And I think sometimes it's important to draw that distinction, between the coach, the selector, the psychologist. I mean, it's important for them to interact, but when one person knows a little too much about you, players might feel that, hey, if I open up to my coach, let's say, and the coach is also going to influence my selection, what if my coach knows that I'm having like a depressive episode or I'm having issues at home? Is this going to affect me negatively? So a lot of times they may not be willing to speak to their coaches.
true, true, true. You
Definitely.
need to have that safe space
Yeah, I'm
to
not
feel
saying that.
like
Yeah, I'm not saying don't go
not
speak to your coach, but I'm saying everyone may not feel that comfort. You definitely need a psychologist, on board to, and not like on tomorrow's the game, come today, talk to them today, and that's it. I think, as you said, it's a very sustained effort which needs to kind of go on through the season, off season, because
true,
mental
true,
health doesn't see your game schedule. It kind of
true, true,
stays
true.
with you. So
Or your sleeping schedule, or your food schedule,
yeah, or
and
whether it's
wake up
COVID,
time.
not COVID, whether you're in a bio bubble, it really doesn't care.
True. And it affects anyone. It's not just reserved for a certain class of people. It affects everyone.
And across all sports also, team sport, individual sports, it's for everybody. It's not that, or
And
even
it's not
levels
just
of sport.
it's not just at the athlete level, but coaches themselves can also go through a lot of mental health issues. Referees as well. I mean, I think referees go through one of the most stressful situations during the game, sometimes even more than the players, because they have to make those decisions, and based on what they say, they'll either be loved or they'll be hated, or they'll be loved by one set of fans and hated by the other set of fans.
Right. I think that's a very important aspect, which, I never thought of really, is that the mental health of a referee or even the coach for that matter. I mean, if you're losing continuously, hello, the axe is on everybody's head. That
True, true.
self-blame, that sort of that element where, as you said, you draw that boundary between, your personal life and your work life. And that's something I think everyone needs to kind of realize. And with social media, the amount of hate and trolling which goes on now, I mean, that was not a problem in past. Like, when teams perform badly, they're under crossfire online as well.
True, true, true. Lot of social media bashing, and that's why one very important thing for athletes and their mental health is to just stay away from any kind of media and social media, days before their game. Because if you're engaging with that content and something might put you off, something might trigger you, it's going to affect your game. So it's better to, if you can't handle it, then to just
Because
not
I think
keep any of the things around.
Yeah, because frankly now, in the digital age, it's very difficult, I think, for players to, disconnect from social media in a way. It's become such a huge part of your life. There's this expectation that you're going to be 24/7, connected to your fans and
True, true.
like, just kind of posting content. And it's like, if you don't comment on this, then, oh my God, so and so did not comment on this. That is also a problem. So
It's
that
also
cross.
another role in your life, because I think now what's happening is there's a lot of endorsements, a lot of commercial value coming in from those angles. So I think players feel the need to keep that game up as well, that game strong. So it becomes another responsibility for them, not just for themselves but also to provide for their family. So I think they're almost playing two roles, one of an athlete and one of like a social
Celebrity
media.
almost, like an influencer.
Exactly, exactly, yeah.
See, another thing is, Kunashni, sports has been around for decades. It's not something new, that suddenly people have started playing sport. But one thing that's changed in recent years is that more and more athletes are coming out and speaking about their mental health. But I mean, what do you think has sort of contributed to, like I don't know whether you'd call it these years of silence, or would you rather say, what is now giving them that confidence to be open and, talk about the mental health issues that they're going through?
I think it's the awareness that these conditions do exist, and if you're experiencing something like this, then come out and speak out about it. I think there still is a lot of stigma around any kind of mental health issue that people are going through, but I think those walls are slowly, if not breaking down, but being slowly scraped off. So I think this whole wave of you know mental health awareness is the reason for athletes speaking up now, because like you said, like, these sports isn't new, mental health concerns aren't new, it's just that we're getting to hear about them more. Recently I remember watching an interview where Rahul Dravid was talking about how more athletes are coming out and speaking out about it, and that's such a great thing. And to encourage more cricket players and all other sports players also in the country to speak out about it. So if we have figures like him, advocating on mental health, I think it's gonna have a huge impact on the community at large. People will speak up, they will change that narrative. So I think it's super important, and it's about time that this happens, because whether it's boxing, whether it's swimming, whether it's football, every athlete is going to go through this. So the more we all speak up about it, it's easier for people who are going through that to share their story and talk about it.
Right. I'm not sure if you're also aware that, recently in the UK, I think, Freddie Flintoff made a documentary where he spoke about his struggle with bulimia. Now, like, we normally talk about, depression, anxiety, panic attack. We rarely think that, sports people, hey, they may even go through eating disorders, or, that firstly, sports people, secondly, men, that a male
Exactly.
athlete is coming and talking about like body image issues, or that he's had an eating disorder. So as you said, I think maybe it's the wave of the time, maybe it's that people now feel they're more comfortable to come out and talk about it. But in a way, it's good that they are talking about it, and hopefully this will continue. Like, people will see that, people will pick up from that. But see, one concern which remains is that not all stories of sports people who share their concern really make it to the news. I'm sure it's not just, like a Rahul Dravid or a Flintoff or someone who's come and spoken about it. So do you think somewhere that, the popularity of the sport itself affect the publicity that that story gets? And how can we change that? Because I think we focus so much on the bigger sports that and the bigger national level sports that we somewhere forget, that there are more stories coming out. I'm sure like there may have been many stories over the years which we're not aware of.
True. Definitely. I think the popularity of the sport is one of the driving factors into what gets noticed and what doesn't. The most news that we hear is about cricket, maybe a little about football, a little about tennis, some kabaddi with all these pro leagues coming up. But what about the non-mainstream sports? The lesser known sports, stuff like fencing, judo, karate, all these things that there are athletes, Indian athletes performing abroad, but their story is not being told. So, mental health aside, just their, you know, regular achievements in the sport is
Exactly.
not being showcased, is not reaching the audience, the larger Indian audience. So, if that itself is not showing, I don't think a mental health issue is going to come up. And to change that, I think the power lies within the institution and the whole way of how news reporting happens. But it's a very difficult cycle to break, because what already exists and what people are already interested in, the news media is just going to churn that out. So it's going to take a lot of effort on the part of the audience to change their interest, to change their preference, and also of the media channels where they're focusing. So I think it can't just happen from one place. It has to be an effort from all angles, and even the athletes themselves, to reach out. And if nobody's listening to your story, make noise and get your story heard. So if you know that there's lack of popularity in your sport, there's something that you need to do about it. So people who've made big changes, who've made big waves, they didn't start like that with a lot of support. They also started with maybe 1-2 people knowing the idea. So I think it can come from anywhere, this change, from the athlete, from the sporting body, from the media, from the audience. So it really requires a full effort from everywhere.
And I think you have a very valid point. I mean, two things that you said from this kind of struck with me is one, that we don't talk about the other sports at all. So let alone, the mental health stories that are going to come out of it. Even mental health stories, we still feel that it's a very hush hush thing. You'll see it more on social media than on, television and print media. We're not very open to that. And I think even then it caters to a very specific audience, the way those stories come out, the stories which come out. So I think the impetus also lies on us as the audience to make sure that we consume other content, we talk about other content which may kind of drive those stories to come out. So
True,
talking
true, true. It's
about,
all about demand and supply.
I definitely, so I think, we've spoken a lot about like sports persons, and we know that they can have a major impact on communities. But when it comes to talking about their mental health, what impact do you think that that could have on wider communities? Like if sports persons come out more, they openly have conversations about mental health. It doesn't have to just be that, oh, I'm suffering, but it could be about spreading awareness. It could be about ending the stigma. It could be about encouraging people to seek help. What impact will that have, in your opinion?
I think coming out, speaking about it, it will really normalize the whole thing. Just how, if you get hurt in a match like I did when I was playing and I had to go see a doctor at hospital, just like I had to seek medical help for that. If we normalize mental health issues and mental health concerns, it's also going to normalize people going and seeking support for their mental health problems that they're going through, and it's going to make the recovery much faster. You might have an injury, but because of all the mental stuff going on with the guilt, the frustration, the doubt, it's going to elongate your process to come back. Or you lost a very important game, the finals, and you see yourself not performing for the next years because of that one failure. So without the right kind of support, it's very easy to spiral down into a dark space, into a negative space. And just talking about that, this is something you can go through. Maybe if I'm not going through it, but this is something that people might be going through. Do you see signs in yourself? you know let's do something about it. So it will really normalize everything, and I think that's super important. I remember there's an archery player from India. Her name is Deepika Kumari, and
Okay.
there is a documentary about her as well on Netflix called Ladies First, and it's an absolutely wonderful documentary to watch. And she talks about how she went to play for the Olympics, and she was a profound athlete, very good at her sport, but because she wasn't able to match up in one of her games and had to get out of the Olympics at that time, in London Olympics, it really set her back for the next few years. And then 4 years later, she went back and played for the Olympics again. And what she said in that whole documentary is that अगर हमारे पास mental coach होता तो मुझे ये सब नहीं करना पड़ता. So if I had mental health support at that time, it would have been much better for me, and I would have come out of it much faster. So I think if people are aware, if it's normalized, it's going to help not just Deepika, not just other athletes who are going through it, but everybody who is talking about it, and even younger athletes as well. If you see your mentors talking about this, you're going to feel inspired and share this at a much younger age. So a lot of teenagers go through depression, go through anxiety, body image issues, so many things going on, and they think that there's something wrong with them. So that will also normalize. If you see your heroes talking about it, it's going to make you more comfortable and say, yes, this is something I'm going through, and then there would be no shame about it, no stigma about it.
I think, that's the main thing, that, athletes, especially in a country like India, which is so sport crazy, like the impact that they have, like the influence which they have, I think, whether they feel comfortable or not sharing their story, just having that conversation, you rightly said, a lot of young people really hero worship them,
True,
so
true.
that it makes it relatable, like they become a little more human, that, oh, even my favorite sports star is going through this and I'm not alone. It doesn't just, it happens to everybody. Like, you can be the most successful person out there and you can still be struggling. And that,
True,
will normalize the conversation. People may be willing, it might even spread more awareness. And more
true, true.
teams will hopefully then see the value in having sports psychologists on board, like, as you mentioned from what the Deepika Kumari documentary, the where she has spoken about having a sports psychologist. That itself, I think, should be a wake up sign for people that, they need it more, especially, I think, look at this year. I mean, you've not had an Olympics. A lot of major tournaments have been cancelled. I am personally not aware of what they're doing for the players, because a lot of them, they kind of look forward to this every 4 years. That's the time they come back, into people's, eye and the limelight. Okay, I exist, my sport exists. Both things exist. And
Yes.
just sort of missing out on that, like especially even team sport, they've not played sport for such a long time. And just look at the IPL. I remember, like, when a lot of players came back on the field, the first thing a lot of viewers commented, it was on social media, is like, look what's happened to them, they've become very sloppy over the lockdown, etc., etc. But see, that is something where if you have, like, sports psychologists or anybody working with them, you can help them in that period. It's not been easy for anybody. I mean, you know that, I know that, we all know that. But just sort of telling people that it's okay, everyone goes through it, I think that will
Mhm.
really make a big difference.
Yes, yes, definitely. I think what you said is absolutely right. It's a very good point. It's super important that this is something that we given importance to.
No, so I think, Kunashni, thank you for all your time. I know you've been very kind. You have a very busy schedule. You have a lot of things going on. So it's been very insightful. And thank you for sharing your advice, your journey, your learnings. And I'm sure a lot of people will draw a lot of inspiration from this. And to everybody watching, I'm just going to once again reiterate that, if you are struggling, just reach out to somebody. There is always someone available. Talk to somebody. Know that it's okay to struggle. Like, you are not broken. You are not a thing. You're a human being. And we all have emotions. And if you're not okay, it's fine. It's absolutely okay to not be okay. Just reach out and know that you can heal, know that things do get better. And till then, stay well, stay healthy, and keep up with our content. If there's anything you'd like to see, leave a comment. We'll try and see what we can do about that. So thank you.